8 centuries have not erased the world's greatest missing persons case. Somewhere beneath the vast Mongolian steppe lies the final secret of Genghis Khan, a tomb so deliberately hidden that its discovery could rewrite history. This is not just a story about a missing grave. It is a detective story spanning continents and generations, fueled by rumors that the tomb was not only located, but then sealed away by forces who want its truth to stay buried. By the end, you will piece together the evidence from high-tech expeditions and whispered accounts to decide for yourself if this ancient mystery has already been solved in secret. We will follow the trail from a death shrouded in ritual to modern-day denials that only deepen the intrigue. What is it about this one man's final resting place that compels us to search and perhaps to hide what we find? He was born with the name Temujin, clutching a blood clot in his fist, a sign his people believed foretold a destiny written in conquest. That boy, cast out into the brutal Mongolian wilderness after his father's murder, would not just become a king. He would become an idea, a force of nature given human form, known to history as Genghis Khan. His story begins with survival on the harsh steppe, a place that taught a simple, unforgiving lesson: unite or perish. Through sheer force of will and political genius, he did what no one before him could. He bound the warring Mongol tribes into a single, terrifyingly efficient nation, not with the promise of shared culture, but with a new law, the Yasa, and the shared spoils of victory under his eternal blue sky. The empire he forged was unlike anything the world had seen. At its peak, it stretched from the shores of the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna, from the frozen Siberian taiga to the humid jungles of Southeast Asia. It was the largest contiguous land empire in human history, a colossal network of trade routes and terror that connected east and west. Yet, for all his world-shaking power, his end in the year 1227 was deliberately wrapped in shadow. Historical accounts are vague, citing a fall from a horse or illness during a campaign, but the true circumstances of his death were a state secret of the highest order. This secrecy was the first layer of the tomb's protection. Genghis Khan himself understood that a conqueror's grave becomes a target, a symbol for rivals to desecrate. So he set in motion a plan for eternal concealment. The legends that followed are chilling in their thoroughness. It is said his most loyal soldiers escorted the funeral procession carrying his body back to the homeland. To ensure no living soul could ever betray the location, these soldiers then slaughtered every person they encountered on the journey back, a moving curtain of death erasing its own tracks. Then, according to the most persistent tale, the soldiers themselves were killed by a separate military unit sworn to secrecy. But the final act of hiding is perhaps the most poetic. One legend claims his resting place was sealed beneath a river. They diverted its entire course to bury the Khan in the riverbed, then released the waters to flow over him forever, a liquid shield of stone and sediment. Whether this river story is literal truth or powerful metaphor, the intent is crystal clear. Genghis Khan did not want a monument. He wanted to vanish, to become one with the land he conquered, leaving only his legacy above ground and an irresistible mystery below it. The mystery of his burial began with the enigma of his death. Even the moment he left this world is cloaked in conflicting whispers from history. Some chronicles, written by those beyond the borders of his empire, claim he died from wounds suffered in battle against a Chinese kingdom. Others suggest a simple, tragic accident, a fall from his horse during a hunt. The most widely accepted account within Mongol tradition points to an illness, perhaps a lingering fever contracted during his final campaign. The truth is, we may never know the precise cause, and that ambiguity feels intentional. For Genghis Khan, the circumstances of his end were less important than the control of what happened next. The real story, the one that matters for our search, is not how he died, but what his people did immediately afterward. Our best window into these secretive rituals comes from a remarkable text called The Secret History of the Mongols, an epic account composed for the royal family. It describes a funeral procession of profound solemnity. His body was carried in a sealed cart, escorted by his most trusted generals, back toward the sacred mountains of his homeland, a journey that itself was a state secret. The destination was almost certainly the Burkhan Koldun mountain range, a place he had revered since his youth as a sanctuary. Upon arrival, the burial rites would have been conducted with extreme precision. According to tradition, the earth itself was made to forget. The ground was trampled by 1,000 horses to erase any signs of digging. Trees were planted over the site in a dense, confusing pattern. But one of the most powerful rituals involved the games. It was customary to hold a nodam at the burial site of a great leader. Nodam means games, specifically the three manly sports of wrestling, horse racing, and archery. This was not a celebration in the way we might think. It was a sacred act, a final offering of strength and skill to honor the departed and to consecrate the ground. Once these games were held, the location became taboo, a place of such potent spiritual significance that to disturb it was considered unthinkable, a curse upon oneself and one's lineage. So the tomb was hidden not just by dirt and diversion, but by a powerful cultural prohibition, a command from the past that said, "This place is not for you." This sets the stage for the centuries of silence that followed. The land kept the secret because the people were taught to avert their eyes. This deliberate vanishing act was not just for Genghis Khan alone. It was a sacred burial protocol perfected for the Mongol elite, a blueprint for erasure. To understand how a tomb could disappear so completely, we must look at the standard practices for a Khan's funeral, a process designed to leave no blueprint behind. First, the grave itself was no simple hole in the ground. It was dug deep, a vertical shaft descending into the earth, often lined with stone. The Khan would be placed within, surrounded by the treasures of his life, weapons, gold, silks from distant lands. But this was not merely a display of wealth. In the Mongol worldview, these items were necessities for the next life. Sometimes this entourage included sacrificed horses, prized steeds to carry him onward, and in the earliest traditions, even servants who would accompany their master into eternity. Once the chamber was sealed, the real work of concealment began. The excavated earth was returned with painstaking care, layer by layer, to make the ground look utterly undisturbed. But the Mongols knew that freshly turned soil tells a story, so they employed a brutal, effective solution. They would drive a herd of horses back and forth over the entire area for days on end. 1,000 hooves churned the earth, obliterating any sign of digging, compacting the ground until it was as hard and seamless as the surrounding steppe. Nature itself was then recruited as a co-conspirator. Young trees, often saplings, were planted in a dense, irregular thicket over the site. As years turned into decades, these trees would grow, their roots weaving through the burial chamber, creating a living, tangled shield. In some accounts, the final step was even more dramatic, the total diversion of a river to flow over the grave, using the relentless power of water as a permanent seal. Yet, the most chilling aspect of the protocol involved not the landscape but the people. The legend states that every slave who dug the grave, every soldier who guarded the procession, every witness to the final resting place was executed. This was the ultimate security measure. A buried secret is only as safe as the minds that hold it. By silencing all who knew, the secret died with them, leaving only the wind and the grass as eternal guardians. This established the how of the initial hiding. It was a system of total obliteration, targeting the ground, the markers, and even human memory. With such a thorough erasure at the moment of burial, the tomb of Genghis Khan did not just become lost to time. It was designed from the outset to never be found. For over 700 years, the secret held. The sprawling empire Genghis Khan built fractured and faded, but the taboo surrounding his burial site did not. Among the Mongolian people, speaking of the tomb's location or even speculating about it openly was considered deeply disrespectful and dangerously foolish. It was more than a cultural memory, it was a living prohibition, a spiritual fence around a piece of land everyone agreed should remain lost. This wasn't just about hiding a grave from invaders, it was about honoring the final wish of a figure who straddled the line between king and deity. To search for it was to invite misfortune, a curse that could follow a family for generations. So the steppe kept its silence, guarded not by soldiers but by belief. Into this landscape of whispered secrets came outsiders, ears straining to hear a story the locals would not tell. The most famous of these was the Venetian merchant Marco Polo in the 13th century. Traveling through the now peaceful Mongol realm, he collected astonishing tales of the great Khan's power and wealth, but when it came to the tomb, he found only a frustrating void. He recorded that after Genghis Khan's death, his body was carried to a great mountain named Altai, but no one dared point the way. The location was already slipping from fact into legend, a puzzle without a map, discussed in hushed tones in caravanserais but never on the open plain. As centuries turned, the mystery tantalized historians and adventurers from beyond the steppe. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw a new wave of explorers, armed with maps and a scientific spirit, determined to succeed where mystery had failed. They faced a challenge of almost absurd scale. The suspected burial region, the Kentai Mountains, is a wilderness larger than many European countries, a sweeping expanse of forested peaks, roaring rivers, and valleys untouched by roads. Expeditions would vanish into this vastness for months, following vague clues from ancient texts or local folklore, only to return exhausted and empty-handed. The landscape itself seemed to defy them. The very methods of concealment, the trampled earth, the redirected streams, the forests planted to confuse, had worked perfectly. A tomb hidden with the intent to never be found was doing exactly that. Each failed expedition added another layer to the legend, proving that some secrets are buried not just in earth but in time itself. The resilience of this mystery was absolute, a silent testament to the efficiency of those long-ago funeral guards. It seemed the world would simply have to accept that some doors are meant to stay closed. But then, the 20th century brought a new kind of seeker, one who looked not only at the ground but from the sky. Deep in the heart of the Kentai Mountains lies a place that is not simply hidden but forbidden. Its name is Ikh Khorig, which translates to the Great Taboo, and for centuries this vast, rugged territory has been the single most compelling candidate for the lost tomb. This is not just any patch of wilderness. This was the sacred homeland of Genghis Khan's own Borjigin tribe, the landscape of his youth where he found refuge and strength. It is a place woven into the very fabric of his legend. Following his death, the area did not just fade into obscurity. It was sealed by decree. The Mongol Empire declared Ikh Khorig a strictly protected zone, a necropolis for the royal family where ordinary people were forbidden to enter, hunt, or even tread. Guarded by a special warrior clan known as the Uriankhai, this prohibition was enforced with lethal seriousness. To cross the boundary was to invite death. This was not a passive forgetting, but an active, enforced silence. Remarkably, this protection endured long after the empire fell. Later rulers, including the Buddhist spiritual leaders and even the 20th century communist government of Mongolia, maintained the restriction. The area became a military closed zone, keeping outsiders away for reasons that blended state security with lingering cultural reverence. The terrain itself enforced the rule. Ikh Khorig is a natural fortress of dense forests, steep river valleys, and remote peaks, a landscape virtually designed to keep secrets. It is a perfect natural vault, its isolation acting as both a physical barrier and a psychological one. For any explorer or archaeologist, this presented a tantalizing yet frustrating paradox. The very place that history and tradition pointed to as the most logical resting place was also the one place on Earth they were most systematically prevented from investigating. The Great Taboo did not just hide a potential tomb, it created an aura of absolute mystery around an entire region, turning the where of our search into a question surrounded by a guarded geographical silence. The Great Taboo could not hold forever against the modern world. In the early 1990s, the political landscape of Mongolia shifted dramatically with the peaceful fall of its communist government. Suddenly, the doors that had been sealed for decades, both political and geographical, were thrown open. For the first time in living memory, foreign researchers and explorers could apply for permits to enter the once forbidden zones. This triggered a literal gold rush for history's ultimate prize. The 1990s became a decade of frenzied searching as international teams from Japan, the United States, and elsewhere descended upon the Mongolian steppe with satellite maps, ground-penetrating radar, and unshakable confidence. It was a collision of ancient mystery and cutting-edge technology. Leading the charge was a University of Chicago historian named John Woods, who spearheaded a major multi-year project. His team and others like it represented a new kind of quest. They weren't treasure hunters with shovels, they were scientists with scanners, believing that the same tools used to find oil deposits or archaeological walls could finally pierce the 800-year-old veil. The excitement was palpable, generating headlines around the globe. It felt like a matter of time. If Genghis Khan's tomb was hidden by diverting a river, satellite imagery could spot the old riverbed. If it was buried under a forest, radar could see the unnatural void beneath the roots. This was the era that promised answers, a decisive end to the legend. But the steppe and its people held complexities no radar could detect. The teams quickly learned that their high-tech gear was useless without local knowledge, and that the cultural taboo against disturbing the past was not a relic but a living, breathing sentiment. Many Mongolians viewed these foreign expeditions with deep suspicion, seeing them not as scholarly pursuits but as a new form of plunder, a violation of a sacred peace. The technological gold rush was about to meet an immovable object tradition. Among these modern adventurers, one man's obsession would bring the search to a dramatic and controversial peak. His name was Maury Kravitz, a Chicago attorney and amateur historian who had devoted decades of his life to solving this single puzzle. While academic teams worked methodically, Kravitz operated with the fervor of a detective closing in on a suspect. His key clue was not from a satellite but from a dusty, centuries-old text. He became convinced that the true location was not just somewhere in the vast Kentai range, but on one specific sacred mountain, Burkhan Koldun. This was the peak Genghis Khan himself had praised as his protector, the place where he had hidden from his enemies as a young man. To Kravitz, this personal connection made it the only logical choice. Armed with this theory and his own substantial funds, he assembled a private expedition in 2001, dubbing it the Valley of the Khans Project. His team was a mix of Western researchers and local Mongolian guides, and they headed straight for the slopes of Burkhan Koldun. Their tool of choice was ground-penetrating radar, a device that sends pulses into the earth and reads the echoes to map buried structures. For weeks they scanned the difficult terrain, and then their instruments gave them a staggering reading. Deep beneath the forest floor, the radar suggested the presence of a massive, rectangular structure made of stone, far larger than any known Mongolian burial from that period. The data indicated walls aligned with the cardinal directions, a hallmark of significant ceremonial construction. To Kravitz and his team, this was it. They believed they had found the architectural footprint of Genghis Khan's hidden tomb. The announcement sent shockwaves through the archaeological world and sparked a media frenzy. Headlines proclaimed the mystery was finally solved, but discovery is only the first step and validation is another matter entirely. the Mongolian government, reacting to both the international spotlight and deep-seated cultural concerns, swiftly denied Kravitz's team permission to excavate. The stone structure, if it was even there, would remain buried. The expedition's claim ignited a fierce debate that still smolders today. Was it a genuine breakthrough, or were the radar echoes just a tantalizing geological formation, a trick of the Earth? Kravitz's passion had brought the world closer than ever to a potential answer, only to have the door slammed shut by the very forces of secrecy and protection that had guarded the secret for 800 years. It was a stark reminder that some truths are considered too powerful to unearth. The stone structure beneath Birken Cauldron remained a tantalizing, unproven ghost. It was a clue that demanded a new kind of investigation, one that could respect the ground it sought to uncover. That investigation arrived in 2009, not with shovels but with satellites. It was called the Valley of the Khans Project, a multi-year expedition led by a young engineer and explorer named Albert U. Min Lin, and it was funded by the National Geographic Society. This was not a dig, it was a scan, a revolutionary attempt to solve an 800-year-old mystery without ever breaking the soil. Dr. Lin's philosophy was built on respect, to find the tomb through observation, not excavation, thereby honoring the cultural wishes of the Mongolian people. His team deployed an arsenal of 21st-century eyes. High-resolution satellite imagery mapped the terrain in minute detail, revealing subtle variations in vegetation and soil moisture that might hint at buried structures. Unmanned aerial drones, then a novel technology for archaeology, flew low over the most remote valleys, capturing three-dimensional models of the land. They even used advanced geophysical sensors that could detect magnetic and electrical anomalies deep underground. The data they gathered was staggering, millions of pixels representing thousands of square kilometers of the most rugged landscape on Earth. The problem was no longer a lack of information, it was an overwhelming surplus of it. No single team of scientists could possibly analyze it all, so Dr. Lin made a bold, unprecedented decision. He turned the search over to the world. The project launched an online platform where anyone, anywhere, could become a digital explorer. Volunteers were presented with thousands of satellite images and simply asked to tag anything that looked unusual, a straight line, a circular pattern, any geometric shape that seemed out of place in nature. It was a global crowdsourcing experiment, a digital hunt for a physical secret. The response was phenomenal. Over 10,000 online volunteers from more than 100 countries spent countless hours meticulously scanning the Mongolian steppe on their computer screens. They flagged more than 2 million potential sites of interest, a collective effort that transformed the search into a shared human endeavor. From this ocean of data, the scientists identified 55 high-priority anomalies, places where both human intuition and algorithmic analysis agreed something was worth a closer look. The most promising of these were then investigated on the ground using non-invasive techniques like ground-penetrating radar, the same technology that had sparked the earlier controversy. This project represented a perfect marriage of global curiosity and cutting-edge science, a search conducted at the respectful distance of orbit and bandwidth. It captured the public imagination completely, proving that the mystery of Genghis Khan's tomb was not just an archaeological puzzle, but a story that belonged to everyone. Yet, for all its technological brilliance and global participation, it faced the same ultimate barrier. The final step, the act of digging for proof, remained forbidden. Then, in 2015, the world believed the search was over. Major British newspapers and international news agencies erupted with a stunning declaration. Archaeologists had found the tomb of Genghis Khan. The reports were specific and confident. A joint Mongolian and Japanese research team working in the heart of the forbidden Ikh Khorig region had reportedly uncovered a vast ceremonial complex. This was not a single grave, but an entire necropolis, a city of the dead containing more than 50 individual tombs arranged with clear purpose. At the center of this complex, the stories claimed, lay one burial mound of exceptional size and prominence, surrounded by the remains of ritual sacrifices. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The location perfectly matched the historical taboo zone. The scale suggested a site fit for an emperor, and the source was a credible scientific collaboration. Headlines around the globe trumpeted the end of an 8th-century-old mystery. For a few dizzying days, it felt as if the greatest historical puzzle of all had been neatly solved, the secret of the steppe finally laid bare by trowel and scholarship. The public fascination was instantaneous, a collective intake of breath. After so many false starts and high-tech hunts, the answer appeared to arrive not with a fanfare of new technology, but with the quiet, definitive authority of traditional archaeology. The story spread like wildfire across social media and news cycles, a satisfying conclusion to a timeless enigma. It was the discovery that rocked the world of history, promising to rewrite textbooks and finally grant the conqueror a known resting place. But in the world of Genghis Khan, nothing is ever that simple, and a truth that seems definitive is often just the beginning of a deeper mystery. That definitive answer lasted less than 72 hours. Before the headlines could even settle, a wall of official denial slammed down with startling force. The Mongolian government issued a terse, unequivocal statement, flatly contradicting the global news reports. They declared that no discovery of Genghis Khan's tomb had been made, and no such announcement had ever been authorized. The Mongolian Academy of Sciences, the nation's premier scholarly body, echoed this with firm clarity, distancing itself entirely from the sensational claims. Perhaps most damningly, the Japanese archaeologists from the reported joint expedition also publicly refuted the story. They stated their work was ongoing survey research in the Ikh Khorig region, and they had neither found nor claimed to have found the emperor's tomb. The quotes were brief, dry, and absolute, a unified front of institutional silence. The world had celebrated a discovery, and the official guardians of that history simply said, "No, you are mistaken." This immediate, unified backlash was far more than a simple correction of a journalistic error. It revealed the profound political and cultural sensitivities that have always surrounded this search. For Mongolia, Genghis Khan is not merely a historical figure. He is the father of the nation, a symbol of identity and pride in a world dominated by larger neighbors. His legacy is a cornerstone of modern Mongolian sovereignty. To have foreign archaeologists or even a sensationalist media cycle declare they had found him would be seen by many as an act of profound disrespect, a violation of a national trust. It would commercialize a sacred mystery and potentially open the door to demands for excavation, which to most Mongolians remains an unthinkable disturbance of a spiritual resting place. The government's swift denial was a protective measure, a reaffirmation of control over a narrative that is deeply intertwined with the country's very soul. So we are left with a stark and fascinating conflict. On one side, a wave of international reporting claiming a monumental archaeological breakthrough. On the other, a chorus of official voices from the very source of the story calling it false. This forces us to ask a much more intriguing question than simply where the tomb is. The question becomes, what really happened? Was it merely a case of exaggerated reporting, where preliminary findings about a large ceremonial site were mistakenly inflated into the discovery of the central tomb itself? This is the simplest explanation, a game of telephone where a researcher's cautious hypothesis becomes a newspaper's definitive headline. But the scale and speed of the denial fuel a more tantalizing alternative. Could it be that something was found, something so significant that it prompted an immediate, coordinated clampdown to seal the information away? The idea of suppression is not just conspiracy, it is a logical possibility when dealing with a secret that has been protected for 8 centuries by taboo, geography, and now by national policy. The denial does not end the mystery, it deepens it, transforming the search from an archaeological puzzle into a potential political and cultural secret. This clash between discovery and denial exposes the true heart of the mystery. It is no longer a question of what technology can find, but of what a culture chooses to protect. For many Mongolians, the idea of excavating Genghis Khan's tomb is not an exciting scientific prospect, it is a profound spiritual violation. The belief is not a superstition of the past, but a living, breathing conviction. To disturb the resting place of the great Khan is to risk unleashing his wrath, an act that could bring catastrophic misfortune, not just to an individual, but to the entire nation. This is often called the curse of Genghis Khan, a protective spell woven into the very soil to guard his eternal peace. The sentiment is simple and powerful. Some doors are closed for a reason, and opening them invites chaos. This spiritual view is inseparable from a powerful wave of modern nationalism. After decades under foreign influence, Genghis Khan has re-emerged as the ultimate symbol of Mongolian identity and pride. His image is on the currency, his name graces the international airport, and his legacy is a source of immense cultural strength. From this perspective, the relentless search by foreign expeditions feels like a new form of colonialism, a treasure hunt dressed in scientific clothing. It is seen as outsiders coming to claim the ultimate prize of Mongolian heritage, to dig up the father of the nation and put his bones on display for the world to gawk at. The resistance is not against knowledge itself, but against exploitation, against having a sacred mystery solved by those who may not understand its sacredness. This creates an ethical dilemma with no easy answer. On one side, historians and archaeologists argue for the immense value of controlled, respectful study. They point out that the tomb, if found and properly examined, could be an unparalleled time capsule. It could hold answers about 13th century Mongol culture, technology, and empire building that no history book could ever provide. Learning from it, they argue, could honor Genghis Khan by finally understanding the full scope of his world, and the knowledge could be shared with Mongolia and the world in a dignified way, perhaps through a museum built on the site without ever moving a single bone. But can any promise of respect truly balance the weight of an 800-year-old taboo? The core of the conflict is a fundamental difference in perspective. Is Genghis Khan's tomb primarily an archaeological site, a piece of historical evidence waiting to be analyzed, or is it a sacred grave, a permanent sanctuary that deserves the same privacy and respect we would afford any other burial? The Mongolian people, through their government's actions and widespread public sentiment, have largely answered that question. The tomb's greatest protection in the modern age is no longer a diverted river or a band of assassins. It is a collective cultural decision to let the past rest. This transforms the search from a technical puzzle into a profound human question, where the right to know meets the duty to honor. This cultural reverence is inextricably linked to raw political power. For modern Mongolia, Genghis Khan is far more than a historical figure. He is the bedrock of national identity and a shield of sovereignty. After centuries of domination by its neighbors, first the Chinese Qing dynasty and later the Soviet sphere, Mongolia's rebirth as an independent democracy in the 1990s required a powerful unifying symbol. They found it in the legacy of the world conqueror. His name adorns everything from the main international airport to the most popular brands of vodka, a constant, proud reminder to the world and to themselves of a time when Mongolia was the center of the universe, not a landlocked nation caught between giants. In this context, his tomb is not merely an archaeological site. It is the ultimate national relic, a physical anchor for this reclaimed identity. Whoever controls that relic controls a piece of the nation's soul. This explains the Mongolian government's exceptionally tight grip on all archaeological activity within its borders, especially in the sacred Kentai region. Permits are difficult to obtain, foreign expeditions are closely monitored, and any public statement about a major discovery is carefully vetted, if it is allowed at all. The state's position is one of supreme caution. They are the guardians of a mystery that belongs to the Mongolian people, and they will manage the narrative and any potential discovery entirely on their own terms. The incentives here are monumental and fraught with tension. On one hand, a verified discovery of the tomb would be the biggest cultural event in the country's modern history. It could trigger a global tourism boom, drawing millions of visitors and generating immense revenue, a powerful economic engine for a developing nation. Imagine the pilgrimage, the museum complexes, the worldwide media attention focused solely on Ulaanbaatar. Yet, that very prospect is also the government's greatest fear. Once the genie is out of the bottle, control is lost. The site would instantly become a global focal point, subject to international pressure, demands for access from foreign institutions, and the relentless gaze of the world's media. The sacred could quickly become commercialized, the spiritual significance drowned out by ticket sales and souvenir stalls. More critically, it could invite legal or political claims from other nations or groups, turning a national treasure into an international dispute. The government's possible motive to hide or delay announcing a find, then, becomes a rational act of preservation. It is a sovereign decision to protect a fragile piece of national heritage from being consumed by global curiosity. By maintaining the mystery, they maintain control. They keep the symbol powerful precisely because it remains symbolic, not a physical location to be fought over, photographed, and potentially desecrated. The tomb's greatest protection in the 21st century may no longer be a curse, but a cabinet meeting. Beyond cultural reverence and political control lies a force that could shatter any secret money. The potential financial value buried with Genghis Khan is almost beyond calculation, existing in two parallel economies, one legitimate, the other criminal. First, consider the treasure itself. While Mongol burials were not typically filled with the ornate golden sarcophagi of Egyptian pharaohs, Genghis Khan was no ordinary leader. He commanded the wealth of an entire continent. Historical accounts suggest his grave would contain artifacts of unimaginable historical and material worth, the swords and bows of his conquests, exquisite gold and jade pieces from conquered empires, silks from across the Silk Road, and perhaps the most valuable item of all, the very standard or seal of the great Khan himself. On the legitimate market, these items would be priceless, the crown jewels of any museum. But it is the black market where their value becomes dangerously liquid. The illicit trade in antiquities is a multi-billion-dollar global shadow industry fueled by private collectors who operate outside ethics and laws. A single, verifiable artifact from Genghis Khan's tomb would command a king's ransom in secret auctions, a prize so colossal it would tempt anyone with knowledge of its location. This fear of looting is a primary motive for enforced secrecy. An announced discovery would require a permanent, impenetrable security apparatus to guard a remote site in the Mongolian wilderness day and night, a logistical and financial nightmare. If the world knows where the tomb is never safe. History is littered with examples of ancient sites stripped bare by thieves the moment guards look away. Secrecy, therefore, becomes the ultimate security system, a low-tech, cost-effective way to protect the treasure by denying its very existence to potential plunderers. Yet, flip this coin and you see an equally powerful economic incentive for disclosure. Imagine the tourism impact. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in the 1920s did not just make Howard Carter famous. It created the modern Egyptian tourism industry, an economic engine that continues nearly a century later. A verified Genghis Khan tomb would trigger a cultural and economic earthquake for Mongolia. Ulaanbaatar could become the next Cairo. Planes would fill with history pilgrims, hotels would rise, and an entire ecosystem of guides, museums, and local businesses would flourish. The government could control access, sell tickets, license images, and generate a sustainable revenue stream that could fund the nation's development for generations. This is the agonizing calculation for any custodian of the secret. Does one choose the path of absolute protection through silence, guarding the treasure from thieves but also from the world? Or does one embrace controlled disclosure, betting that the benefits of global fame and legitimate revenue outweigh the immense risks of security breaches and commercialization? Each option carries a price, one paid in potential loss, the other in potential sacrilege. The silence surrounding the tomb, then, might not just be about honoring the dead, but about balancing an impossible ledger where the columns are labeled preservation and prosperity. But what if the greatest trick of all was convincing the world to look in the wrong place? The overwhelming focus has been on Mongolia, a logical conclusion built on history and tradition. Yet, a handful of dissenting voices and tantalizing clues suggest we might be chasing a ghost in the wrong nation entirely. The primary alternative theory points a finger south to China. Genghis Khan died during his final campaign against the Western Xia dynasty in what is now China's Ningxia region. Some historians argue that transporting a body over hundreds of miles of rugged terrain while maintaining absolute secrecy would have been a logistical nightmare. Could he have been buried near his place of death in a location so obvious it has been overlooked? This idea gains a strange kind of support from a site that already exists, the Genghis Khan Mausoleum in Ordos, Inner Mongolia. This is a magnificent complex of white buildings and golden domes, a place of profound reverence where ceremonies are held for the great Khan. Yet everyone acknowledges this is a cenotaph, a memorial tomb that contains no body. It houses sacred relics like his saddle and bow, but not his bones. The existence of such a revered symbolic site in China has led some to wonder if the real tomb might be somewhere in the same vast region, hidden in plain sight under the protection of local legends that differ from those in Mongolia. Then there are the whispers from the high Himalayas. Fringe theories, often tied to esoteric Tibetan Buddhist traditions, suggest that Genghis Khan's remains were taken to a secret monastery for spiritual safeguarding. These stories speak of a tomb not just hidden geographically, but consecrated within a living religious practice, watched over by monks who have passed the secret down through generations. Even more distant is the idea of a Kazakh connection, based on the territories of his early empire and the lands of his ancestral clan. These alternatives are not supported by mainstream scholarship, and they lack the cultural consensus of the Mongolian claims. But their existence is crucial to the mystery. They force us to question our assumptions. For 8 centuries, the search has operated on a foundational premise that the tomb must be in the sacred Mongolian homeland. This premise has shaped every expedition, every satellite scan, every political negotiation. But what if that premise itself is part of the concealment? What if the elaborate stories of river diversions and slaughtered guards in Mongolia were a brilliant misdirection, a historical sleight of hand meant to draw all inquiry toward a forbidden zone while the true resting place lies undisturbed elsewhere, without a single taboo to protect it because no one thinks to look there? This expands the mystery from a needle in a haystack to a needle that might be in an entirely different field. It suggests that the secret has been kept not only by silence, but by a masterful narrative that has focused the world's attention on a single, compelling stage. Perhaps the secret to finding one grave lies in studying others. When direct evidence is hidden, archaeologists turn to context, building a picture from what is known to illuminate what is not. This is where the tombs of Genghis Khan's own family become critical, not as the answer but as a guide. His most famous descendant, his grandson Kublai Khan, who completed the conquest of China and founded the Yuan dynasty, provides a fascinating case study. Kublai's own burial is also officially lost, but the historical record surrounding it is far richer and reveals a crucial evolution. He died in China, far from the Mongolian steppe, and his funeral procession back toward the homeland was a massive, documented event. Yet, like his grandfather, his specific tomb was never marked publicly. The secrecy, however, seems to have shifted from total earthly obliteration to a more administrative concealment. Chinese texts describe how the route of his funeral cart was kept secret, and all unfortunate souls who happened to witness it were executed, echoing the old legends. But the emphasis moved toward controlling information and access, rather than attempting to make the landscape itself forget. This suggests a pattern, but not an identical one. Other Yuan dynasty emperors who followed Kublai were buried in a designated imperial cemetery in the mountains north of their capital, Khanbaliq, modern-day Beijing. While the exact locations of their individual mounds are lost, the general area is known, a designated royal zone. This represents a further step away from Genghis Khan's model of absolute geographic erasure. So, was the secrecy a one-time event for the founder or a family tradition? The evidence points to a gradient of concealment. For Genghis, it was total, a fusion of physical and spiritual taboo designed to achieve perfect anonymity. For his immediate successors, like his son Ojdai, the practice remained severe but perhaps more localized. By the time of Kublai and the Yuan emperors 2 generations later, the method had adapted to their settled, administrative rule in China. They maintained secrecy around the specific grave, but within a known, protected necropolis. This familial pattern is a vital clue. It tells us that the extreme measures for Genghis were unique, born from his specific status as the founder and from the purely nomadic culture of his time. It also suggests that if we look for his tomb, we should not expect a pattern identical to his grandson's, but rather the original, more brutal prototype. Studying the later tombs helps archaeologists rule out possibilities. The Yuan burials in China, for instance, often incorporated Chinese architectural elements and were situated in mountainous areas considered auspicious by their advisors. This tells researchers that a purely Chinese-style tomb structure in Mongolia is highly unlikely for Genghis. Instead, they must look for something that fits the earlier, simpler, and far more severe nomadic tradition his own immediate family would have followed, a tradition that left the lightest possible footprint on the earth. By triangulating from these known later practices, the shadow of the first and most important tomb begins to take a slightly clearer shape, defined by what it is not as much as by what it might be. The ground holds its secrets close, but now we have eyes that can see from the heavens. This is the age of satellite archaeology, a quiet revolution that has transformed the search for lost worlds from a hopeful trek into a precise science. Forget the old image of an archaeologist with just a brush and a trowel. The modern hunt begins hundreds of miles above the Earth. Orbiting satellites equipped with advanced sensors capture images that reveal far more than the human eye can perceive. They can detect subtle variations in soil moisture, slight differences in plant health, and minute changes in the Earth's temperature. A buried stone wall, for instance, affects how water drains and how plants grow above it. Over time, crops or grass in that line may be stunted or may grow more vigorously, creating a faint geometric ghost in the vegetation visible only from space. These are called crop marks, and from the vantage point of orbit, a tomb complex could theoretically appear as a series of faint squares or lines etched into the Mongolian steppe, a hidden signature waiting for the right wavelength of light to expose it. But what about a tomb hidden under the dense, tangled forest of the Kentiai Mountains? For that, there is an even more remarkable tool, LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine flying a specially equipped plane or drone over a thick jungle or forest. The system fires millions of rapid laser pulses at the ground. Most pulses hit leaves and branches, but a fraction slip through gaps in the canopy and bounce back from the actual Earth. By calculating the time it takes for each pulse to return, a computer can digitally strip away every single tree, bush, and vine, revealing a breathtakingly detailed three-dimensional map of the bare ground beneath. It is like having the power to make an entire forest instantly vanish to see the hidden landscape below. This technology has already rewritten history in the jungles of Central America, revealing vast, unknown Mayan cities with pyramids and road networks that had been completely invisible for centuries. In Cambodia, LIDAR mapped the ancient city of Angkor in stunning detail, uncovering an urban sprawl far larger than anyone had dreamed. So what could LIDAR see in Mongolia? If the tomb of Genghis Khan is hidden under the sacred forests of Burkhan Koldun, this technology could be the key. It could map every slope, every terrace, every unnatural plateau or rectangular depression that the trees have concealed for 800 years. It could reveal the ancient path of a diverted riverbed or the geometric outline of a ceremonial platform. The critical and tantalizing question is this: has it already been done? It is almost certain that private expeditions and government agencies have flown LIDAR missions over the most promising regions of the Kentiai Range. The data collected would be a digital treasure map of unparalleled clarity, yet none of this data has been made public. This leads to a fascinating possibility. The tomb's location may no longer be a complete mystery to a select few with access to this technology. The secret may now exist as a set of coordinates on a classified hard drive, a digital confirmation of what was only legend. The technology has advanced to the point where finding the tomb is feasible, but deciding what to do with that knowledge, whether to announce it, protect it, or delete it, remains a very human and very ancient dilemma. The most compelling clues are often the ones that never make it into an official report. Beyond the satellite data and the academic papers lies a shadow history of the search, a collection of whispers passed between guides around campfires and rumors exchanged in the back rooms of Ulaanbaatar. These are the insider accounts, the stories that speak of a secret already found. For decades, there have been persistent, unverified tales from Mongolian herders, the people who know every fold of the land. Some speak of stumbling upon strange, man-made stone arrangements in remote valleys, only to return later and find the area mysteriously cordoned off by unmarked vehicles. Others recount legends passed down in families about a sealed cave entrance high on a sacred slope, a place where the wind makes a peculiar sound like a low chant. One recurring anecdote tells of a shepherd whose horse's hoof broke through the ground, revealing not soil but a hollow space and the glint of worked metal below, a story that echoes the discovery of the famous terracotta army in China. The shepherd, so the story goes, reported it to local authorities and was quietly compensated, while the area was suddenly placed under new restrictions. Then there are the accounts from the few foreign archaeologists and journalists who have worked on the fringes of official expeditions. Off the record, some have spoken of unusual levels of military or police presence in specific sectors of the Kentiai Mountains, patrols that seem disproportionate for simple conservation duty. They mention guides who suddenly become nervous and change routes when a certain valley comes into view, offering vague excuses about bad terrain or weather, even under clear skies. A particularly tantalizing rumor suggests that during the Soviet era, a geological survey team using seismic equipment actually pinpointed a large underground anomaly consistent with a burial complex. The data, according to the whisper, was immediately classified and sent to Moscow, and the Mongolian scientists involved were reassigned. Verifying any of these stories is nearly impossible. They live in the realm of oral tradition and anonymous sourcing, where details shift with each telling. The people who know the most have the strongest incentive to stay silent, bound by national loyalty, fear of a curse, or simple orders from above. Yet, the persistence of these rumors across generations is itself a kind of evidence. When so many different people, from nomadic herders to seasoned researchers, independently hint at a pattern of discovery and concealment, it points to a shared, unspoken understanding. It suggests that the truth might not be a single, undiscovered location, but a known fact that has been deliberately removed from public discourse. This layer of the mystery embraces the conspiratorial, not as wild speculation, but as a logical response to an 800-year void. If something has been actively hidden for centuries, is it not reasonable to suspect that its modern discovery would also be met with active suppression? These whispers paint a picture of a secret held by a select few, a truth so powerful that its guardians believe it must remain forever just beyond our reach, a ghost in the landscape that everyone senses but no one can officially name. Among the most persistent rumors is a story that crosses a border, both geographically and politically. It centers on a claim that the tomb was found not by Mongolians or Western explorers, but by Chinese archaeologists, and that this discovery was immediately and permanently buried in bureaucracy. According to this controversial narrative, sometime in the late 20th century, a Chinese team conducting a survey in the autonomous region of Inner Mongolia, near the border with Mongolia proper, stumbled upon a major archaeological site. The story goes that the scale and nature of the findings left little doubt. They had located the lost necropolis of Genghis Khan. Instead of announcing a world-shaking historical triumph, the team was allegedly ordered to rebury the site, seal all records, and swear to secrecy. The dig was filled in, the notes were classified, and the discovery vanished into the silent vaults of state control. This rumor, while impossible to verify officially, forces us to examine a tangled web of motives that make such a cover-up chillingly plausible. Why would China, a nation that proudly claims Genghis Khan as a founder of its Yuan dynasty, hide his tomb? The first motive is national pride and historical control. In China's official historical narrative, Genghis Khan and his successors are integral to the story of Chinese civilization. His grandson Kublai Khan founded the Yuan dynasty, which is listed in the official succession of Chinese imperial dynasties. A tomb discovered on Chinese soil would powerfully reinforce this claim, physically anchoring the Khan's legacy within modern China's borders. However, announcing such a find would also ignite an immediate and explosive political dispute with Mongolia, where Genghis Khan is the paramount symbol of national identity. It could be seen as a cultural annexation, a theft of Mongolia's greatest historical figure. Secrecy, then, becomes a tool to avoid a major diplomatic crisis and an intense nationalist backlash. The second motive is the practical fear of the so-called curse. The belief in a spiritual protection guarding the tomb is not confined to Mongolia. It is a powerful legend across the region. Chinese officials and archaeologists, many of whom are steeped in their own traditions regarding the disturbance of ancient graves, might genuinely fear the repercussions of opening such a site. The potential for public panic or superstition surrounding the discovery could be a significant deterrent, making secrecy the path of least spiritual resistance. Finally, there is the absolute control China maintains over its archaeological narrative. All major digs are state-sanctioned, and findings are often released or suppressed based on their alignment with national interests. A discovery of this magnitude would be a state secret of the highest order. Controlling the narrative allows China to manage the timing, the message, and the political fallout, or to decide that no message at all serves its interests best. The plausibility of this rumor hinges on this very control. China has the capability to make a secret of this scale disappear. Its historical relationship with Genghis Khan is uniquely complex. He is both a foreign conqueror and a domestic dynastic founder, a symbol of Mongol independence and of Chinese imperial unity. This duality makes his tomb not just an archaeological site, but a potent political token. Keeping it hidden might be seen as the only way to prevent it from becoming a flashpoint in a centuries-old story of rivalry and identity. So we are left with a haunting question: is the silence from the east just the quiet of an empty steppe, or is it the deliberate, calculated silence of a secret too volatile to tell? The whispers of discovery and denial all lead to one silent, subterranean chamber. But if we could stand before that final, sealed door, what would we find on the other side? The answer lies in a careful blend of Mongol tradition and the staggering reality of the world's greatest empire. First, the structure itself. We should not picture the gold-filled halls of an Egyptian pharaoh. The early Mongols were pragmatic nomads, and their burial architecture reflected that. The most likely scenario is a deep, vertical shaft dug into the earth, lined with stone for stability, leading to a single, spacious underground chamber. It would be grand in scale, befitting an emperor, but not a labyrinthine complex. Its grandeur would come from what it contains, not from ornate architecture. The chamber would be cold, dark, and intended for eternity. Stepping inside, the first impression would be one of organized wealth, a functional afterlife. Against one wall, we might find the tools of conquest, his composite bow, a quiver of arrows fletched with eagle feathers, and his saber, its steel blade still keen after centuries in the dark. These are not mere artifacts, they are extensions of the man, placed there to carry his authority into the next world. Then, the treasures of a connected world. Piled in chests or stacked on shelves would be bolts of the finest silk from China and Persia, shimmering even in the gloom, and intricate carpets from Central Asia. There would be gold, not as frivolous decoration, but as a statement of power, crafted into cups, belt buckles, and ornaments depicting mythical beasts. Jades, highly prized by steppe cultures, might be carved into ritual objects or personal seals, but perhaps the most poignant items would be the personal ones: a simple cup he drank from, a worn saddle that carried him across continents, objects that whisper of the man behind the myth. And then the companions, according to tradition, his favorite horses, sacrificed to accompany him, their bones arranged with care. Their presence completes the picture of a nomadic lord ready to ride onward. Yet all these treasures circle one central, silent focus: the burial itself. At the room's heart, on a simple stone platform or within a wooden coffin, would lie the remains of Genghis Khan. His body, likely dressed in fine robes and perhaps a helmet, would be the ultimate historical cipher. His bones could reveal his true physical stature, any old battle injuries, and clues about his diet and health. But the real revolution would be genetic. Modern science could potentially trace his direct lineage across Eurasia, verifying the countless claims of descent and mapping the astonishing biological legacy of his empire. It could even offer a glimpse of the man's face, not through artists' interpretations, but through the reconstruction of his actual skull. This is the profound duality of the tomb, a collection of unimaginable material wealth orbiting the one thing that is truly priceless, the physical key to understanding a legend. To find the gold is to find a treasure, but to find the man is to find a mirror for half the world. This scientific bonanza comes with a price, one measured not in gold but in profound ethical conflict. To sequence the DNA of Genghis Khan is to open a biological Pandora's box of unimaginable scale. His Y chromosome, passed directly from father to son, is a unique historical marker. Scientists could theoretically trace its path across the centuries, mapping the genetic footprint of his male line descendants, a population estimated to include millions of men across Central Asia today. This single data point could rewrite family histories and population studies, offering a living, breathing map of the empire's legacy. Beyond lineage, his bones could reveal intimate secrets, the exact cause of his death, chronic illnesses he endured, even his true physical appearance, replacing centuries of artistic guesswork with a forensic portrait. The potential for knowledge is staggering, a chance to touch the biological reality of a man who shaped continents. Yet, this very act of touching is where the dilemma turns into a nightmare. For countless people, particularly in Mongolia, Genghis Khan is not a historical specimen, he is an ancestor of spiritual significance. To extract DNA from his remains would be seen as the ultimate violation, a desecration of a sacred figure for the cold curiosity of science. It reduces a revered father of a nation to a laboratory sample, a data point in a petri dish. Who, then, has the right to grant such permission? Is it a government, a panel of international scientists, or the collective will of a people for whom he remains a living symbol? The debate mirrors those surrounding other ancient remains, from Native American burial grounds to Egyptian mummies, but here the cultural stakes are incalculably higher. The backlash could be severe, sparking international condemnation and reigniting historical grievances. Furthermore, the act of identification itself creates peril. Confirming a living genetic link to Genghis Khan could be weaponized, fueling dangerous claims of superiority or entitlement among those who carry the marker, or conversely, stigmatizing them. The science promises to connect the present to the past in an unprecedented way, but those connections could easily become live wires, sparking new forms of discord in the modern world. The tomb, therefore, holds two opposing truths, one of limitless knowledge, the other of sacred silence. Unlocking the first inevitably shatters the second, forcing a choice between understanding history and honoring it, a choice with no easy answer. Stories of bad luck have shadowed every serious attempt to find the grave. One expedition in the early 2000s reported a sudden, violent hailstorm that appeared from a clear sky just as their ground-penetrating radar began returning promising signals, forcing them to abandon the site for days. Another team experienced a bizarre series of simultaneous vehicle failures, leaving their trucks stranded in a remote valley without explanation. There are whispered accounts of lead archaeologists falling mysteriously ill upon returning home, or of wealthy backers facing sudden financial collapse after funding a search. These anecdotes, shared in hushed tones among explorers, inevitably get labeled the curse of Genghis Khan. It is a trope we recognize from tales of Egyptian pharaohs, where the disturbance of a sacred tomb brings a supernatural reckoning. On a purely rational level, these events are easily explained. The Mongolian steppe is an objectively harsh and unpredictable environment. Sudden storms are common. Remote terrain breaks machinery. The stress of a high-stakes expedition can manifest as illness. Coincidence is the most likely culprit. Yet, the persistence of the curse narrative is far more interesting than any ghost story. It functions as a perfect psychological deterrent, a cultural immune response against intrusion. Whether you believe in spiritual forces or not, hearing enough stories of misfortune gives anyone pause. It plants a seed of doubt that operates on a subconscious level, making a researcher second-guess a dig site or a backer hesitate to write the next check. This psychological barrier is arguably the tomb's most sophisticated modern defense system. It needs no guards or laws, just the power of a story told well enough to make the rational part of our brains whisper, maybe we shouldn't. The curse reinforces the ancient taboo not through fear of the supernatural, but through a deep, ingrained respect for the possibility that some places are simply meant to be left alone. It turns every piece of bad luck into a warning, and every warning into another layer of protection, ensuring that even if you have the maps and the technology, you might not have the nerve to proceed. The evidence we have is a tapestry woven with equal parts fact, legend, and silence. To see the pattern clearly, we need to step back and weigh the three possible endings to this story, judging each on its own merits. The first scenario is the simplest: the tomb is still lost. The argument here is powerful in its directness. The Kentai Mountains are a wilderness the size of a small country, and the burial methods were designed by experts in permanent concealment. Every high-tech expedition has ultimately come up empty, their radar anomalies and satellite tags leading to nothing conclusive. The persistent rumors could be just that, stories that grow in the telling, fueled by our desire for a secret. From this view, the lack of proof is the proof. The system worked perfectly for 800 years, and the steppe is still keeping its promise. The second scenario is far more tantalizing. The tomb has been found by professionals and is being secretly studied. This explains the swift denials and the tight control. If a government or a sanctioned scientific body made the discovery, their first priority would be absolute security to prevent looting and to control the narrative. They could be conducting a decades-long, meticulous study in total secrecy, slowly unraveling the tomb's secrets before ever going public. The strange military patrols and the classified data from old Soviet surveys could fit this theory. It turns the mystery from a search into a waiting game where the answer exists in a locked file, not in the ground. The third possibility is the most definitive and the most final. It was found and then deliberately reburied to keep it hidden forever. This is the ultimate act of cultural preservation. In this version, someone, whether Mongolian authorities, Chinese archaeologists, or a private expedition, did break the seal and look inside. And what they saw, or the sheer weight of responsibility they felt, convinced them to seal it back up. They decided the spiritual risk, the political firestorm, or the threat to the artifact itself was too great. They chose to rehide the truth, adding a modern layer of protection over the ancient one. So which scenario holds the most weight? The evidence for a cover-up is compelling, but it is circumstantial, built on patterns of behavior rather than a smoking gun. Governments do keep secrets, especially about national icons. The cultural taboo is a real, living force, not a superstition. The economic and political incentives to control or suppress a discovery are enormous. Yet, the lack of definitive physical proof, a single verified photograph, a leaked artifact, is a glaring hole. In a world of smartphones and satellites, a secret that big is incredibly hard to keep. Perhaps the truth lies in the blurry space between these options. Maybe the tomb was partially found, its general location confirmed, but its central chamber left untouched and unentered, a compromise between knowledge and reverence. Or maybe the most important discovery has already been made, not of bones and gold, but of a collective decision that some mysteries are more valuable when they remain unsolved. The search for Genghis Khan's tomb may have finally answered a deeper question, not where he is buried, but why we are so determined to find him, and why, perhaps, we are equally determined to look away. So the search today exists in a strange state of suspended animation. It is neither fully active nor completely abandoned, but simmering on a low flame, watched over by satellites and cultural guardians. No major international expeditions are currently scouring the Kentai Mountains with ground teams, as the political and social climate remains firmly against disruptive digging. The era of the public, media-frenzied hunt appears to be over, at least for now. Yet, behind the scenes, the technological evolution continues its quiet march. The next frontier is not more data, but smarter interpretation. Artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are now being trained to do what 10,000 online volunteers once did, but on a scale and at a speed that is almost incomprehensible. These systems can analyze millions of satellite and LIDAR images, not just for geometric shapes but for subtler patterns, the spectral signature of disturbed Earth 8 centuries old, or the faint thermal footprint of buried stone. They can cross-reference historical texts, geological surveys, and folklore databases in seconds, proposing probabilities for locations that a human mind might never connect. Advanced geophysics is also moving beyond simple radar, with tools that can map the electrical resistivity of the deep subsurface or detect the faintest gravitational variations that might indicate a hidden chamber. The capability to find is advancing exponentially, even as the will to dig remains in profound stasis. This technological promise inevitably bumps against the timeless question of permission. The decision to ever lift that final veil does not rest with algorithms or foreign institutes, but with the Mongolian people. Cultural perspectives are not static, they evolve with each generation. The young Mongolians of today and tomorrow, globally connected and navigating a modern identity, may one day view this mystery through a different lens. The powerful taboos held by their grandparents might soften or transform into a desire for a different kind of connection to their heritage. Could a future generation, confident in its national identity and equipped with non-invasive technology, sanction a definitive, respectful investigation? It is possible they might frame it not as a violation but as a reclamation, a chance to finally complete the story of their ancestor on their own terms, using methods that honor rather than disturb. The journey from taboo to sanctioned search would be a monumental cultural shift, but history shows that such shifts do occur, often when a society feels secure enough in its present to re-examine its past without fear. Yet, we must confront the most profound possibility of all, that the answer may forever remain out of reach by design, because the mystery itself is the point. The unresolved question is what fuels the legend. It allows every person in Mongolia and across the world to hold their own version of Genghis Khan, to project their ideas of greatness, mystery, and finality onto that blank space on the map. The moment we pinpoint the coordinates, the moment we catalog the treasures and analyze the bones, something intangible vanishes. The myth collapses into measurable fact. The endless potential of the story is replaced by a single, fixed truth. In a way, the unbroken silence is the most fitting tribute to a man who mastered the art of disappearance. It grants him the eternal privacy he sought, transforming his grave from a physical location into a permanent idea, a story that lives not in the ground, but in the imagination of everyone who hears it. The greatest power Genghis Khan wields today may not be from a buried tomb, but from the endless, echoing question of where it lies. From a death shrouded in ritual to a grave sealed by a river, from the silent vigil of the great taboo to the satellite scans of the 21st century, the search for Genghis Khan's tomb is an epic without an ending. It is a journey that has crossed 800 years, from the hooves of trampling horses to the silent pulses of orbital lasers. We have followed the legend of his deliberate vanishing, the brutal efficiency of his funeral guards, and the enduring power of a cultural taboo that outlasted empires. We have witnessed modern adventurers armed with radar and drones, global volunteers clicking through satellite images, and headlines that flared with discovery only to be extinguished by swift, firm denials. The evidence is a mosaic of high-tech data points and low whispers, of tantalizing anomalies in the soil and unverified rumors in the night. Yet after all this, the central truth remains locked within the Mongolian landscape, guarded by a triple wall of tradition, politics, and the sheer, patient weight of time. The steppe has been scanned, probed, and analyzed, but it has not given up its king. This persistence forces us to confront a deeper idea that some secrets hold more power when they are kept. A solved mystery becomes a fact filed away. An unsolved one becomes a story endlessly retold, a space where history and legend dance together, forever compelling. It asks us what we value more, the cold certainty of an answer or the warm, eternal possibility of the question itself. So we turn it over to you after this journey from 1227 to today. What is your verdict? Do you believe the tomb of Genghis Khan was found in secret and then reburied in silence, a truth too volatile to reveal? Or do you think it still waits undisturbed for a future that may never choose to look? Share your theories in the comments below and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest unsolved mysteries.